Hey guys, there's a question I hear a lot, and it's a very fair question because there are a lot of factors, a lot more factors than people think that come into play when you're trying to answer this question. And the question, as you can tell by the video title, is when should I two hands, right? Now this video is going to be a bit different than my other videos. There's going to be a fair bit more math involved, and trust me, I'm someone that isn't. I find maths boring, but I promise you, maths like this is interesting, and you're gonna learn something. You're gonna learn a lot, actually. I feel like. I feel like when I looked into these things at first, I learned a lot, right? But anyway, who am I to answer a question like this, right? Well, basically, I'm someone that I very primarily play elves, and the thing with elves are pretty much all the warrior baseline elf profiles come with a hand and a half weapon, which means you get to choose if you want a two hand or not, right? So the decision to two hand or not is extremely common if you're an elf player. So I have a lot of experience deciding whether I want a two hand or not. I've looked into a lot of the math in that. So those are my qualifications, right? But before we get into it, a bit of ground kind of rules about what we're looking at exactly. I am looking at when to two hand with warriors mostly, but you'll find that a lot of these concepts apply even when you're looking at heroes and other situations, right? And I'm also going to be talking about when you have the higher fight value when you should two hand. The reason for that is when you have the lower fight value and you can choose to two hand, the answer is very often going to be no. And even when you're tied fight and you can choose to two hand, the answer is very often going to be no. And you might be thinking, well, what about those few times when the answer is yes? You'll find that when you learn about when to two hand when you're higher fight value, you'll start to understand when those times are as well at lower fight value, right? So anyway, let's get into it. Okay, first example, right? We will have a Rivendell warrior, which I should note, even though he has a bow here, Rivendell warriors always have a hand and a half weapon, right? Even if he's got a shield and a spear, he still has a hand and a half weapon as well. Even if he has a bow, he still has a hand and a half weapon. And what that means is a Rivendell warrior can always choose to two hand. And we have a warrior of Minas Tirith. Here are some of their important stats, just so we can, have a refresher if anyone's unaware. The main things to look at here, both strength 3, right? Defense 5 here, defense 6 here, and obviously higher fight on the elf than the warrior. Now, who do you think wins this, right? There's a couple different things. Obviously, as you know, you have higher fight. You're more likely to win the duel roll. That just makes sense. We're doing one dice versus one dice. But what's also important is your ability not only to win, but also to kill, right? So who do you think wins this fight overall? That's the question. Anyway, let's look at what the math says for if they fight normally. No two-handing yet, just fighting normal. Of course, as you can see here, the elf has an almost 60% chance to just win the duel roll, which makes sense with the higher fight. The elf has like a 10% chance to win and kill. So what that means is every 10 times you do this exact fight, on average, one of those times the elf player will win and kill the troop. Obviously, this isn't how it happens in real games often. This is more like you simulate it a million times. It'll average out to this. So keep that in mind, obviously. Dice are crazy, always. But interestingly, the Warrior of Minas Tirith actually has a fairly higher chance to win and kill. Right? 14% chance here to win and kill compared to the elf's 9% chance to win and kill. Which, I mean, surprised me a bit when I first learned it, right? Anyway, how about we look at how the stats look when the warrior here, the elf, is two-handed. The duel roll goes down to less than 50% for the elf, so they're actually, strangely enough, less likely to win, thanks to the -1s incurred by the two-handed. However, the chance to kill like win and kill, goes up a fairly high amount, 6%. But of course, the warrior's chance to win and kill goes up a bit just because the dual roll becomes worse for the elf, right? But if you compare these numbers here, like the chance to win and kill for the elf and the warrior here, you'll see this is like a 4% gap-ish. But here, the elf has kind of bridged it to where they're still overall losing if you look at the math really hard. But it's only like a small, like it's like a 2% gap, right? So by two-handing in this situation, the elf has kind of bridged that gap a little bit. So the question becomes, should you two-hand in this situation? And with what I just said, you might think the answer is obviously yes, because it's a bit better statistically, right? But that is not the answer. One of the most important golden rules of this game, when you're looking at the math, is that you need to use the math to inform your decisions, right? You don't want to use the math to make your decisions, okay? And to do that, you need to look at the bigger picture of things, right? For example, maybe I'm one off breaking and this is the last turn, right? He's fighting me here. I've already broken him, let's say. I don't want to break, you know? I want all the full break VP. So in that case, even though I'm reducing the kill gap, you know, a bit, making the kill gap a bit better for me by two-handing, I just want to win the duel roll. I don't care that much about winning and killing. So in that case, I'm going to not two-hand, right? And on the inverse, of course, if I'm getting very close to breaking my opponent, and maybe I'm not close to breaking myself, right? Or I'm already broken, I might be thinking, I really need this kill, right? And even though I'm increasing my chances to die, I can afford to lose this model, but I really need his models to die, right? This is another example of a situation where, in spite of the math, you might decide to do that. And these aren't the only things, right? Sometimes it can be a positional thing, right? I'll just make up a silly scenario, but you'll get the idea. Let's say the battle line looks something vaguely like this, which it's never really going to look like this, but you'll understand what I'm saying. If this fight is just happening here, you know what I mean? I kill this guy, let's say. I'm trying to kill this model. This doesn't really create much of a gap for me because obviously they have their control zones, right? However, the same exact fight here, so I might not two-hand here, right? Because I don't want to die. But the same fight here, right? Exact same fight. If I kill this model, all of a sudden, it makes a big gap here. Maybe I've got a big hero here. And next turn, I can be like, damn, I could call a heroic move. And now that I've created this big opening, my big hero can come and get into like Saruman or whatever other important model. And that could be huge. That could win me the game, right? In that case, even if the odds are worse for me to two-hand here, the reward can be so big that I'm going to two-hand here. I'm going to go for it. This guy dies, and like that might suck, but you know, models die, right? However, I kill this one model and it can flip the whole game on its head, right? These are extreme examples, but it's what I'm getting at with the math here, is that you're using this math to inform your decisions, and then you're looking at the big picture to decide when you should two-hand, right? Slight variation, but a very important one to go over with. What about a elf with a shield fighting here? Should you two-hand here? This is an important thing to go over. The important thing about two-handing is when you two-hand and you have a shield, you have to put away the shield to two-hand. So this guy is normally D6. So if he fights normally, it's actually pretty good for this elf in a normal fight, in a sense, right? You know, we've seen most of these stats before, but as before, it was like a 13% chance to lose and die or something. Now it's like a 7% chance. And the elf here is actually ahead on chance to win and kill, right? By a couple percent. So, you know, statistically, it's a good thing for the elf to just not two-hand here and be cool. But of course, if you do decide to two-hand here, put away your weapon, lose the extra defense, it goes back to these stats that we saw before, right? But it's a 10% increased chance to die, right? So again, the question is whether you should two hands here. The answer is usually no, but there are times, as we've talked about in the game, where you need things to get more lethal. You need models to die, right? Maybe you need your models to die themselves. Maybe you want to end the game, get to a break or quarter, you want to die. In which case, two-hand, right? But like I said, even if you just need the kills, even though you're massively increasing your chance to die, maybe you can afford to. And yeah. But as a general rule, you in this situation where you're getting wounded on sixes and they're getting wounded on sixes, statistically, it is best to just take that instead of going into the lethal situation of two-handing into them. Let's start adding more dice to the mix, right? Let's get into more standard battle line kind of stuff, right? You'll often have fights like this, spear support, very common. How does this look not two-handing, right? The elves still around 60% chance to win the duel roll. Not too bad, almost 20% chance to win and kill. Up compared to the warriors' chances to win and kill, which is more about 15% chance, right? Should you two-hand here as the elf player? You might be thinking, well, the roll's not going to be as penalized because I have a real dice here that's helping out, it can do a lot of the legwork for me. How does this look, right? As you can see, the duel roll doesn't actually go down that much. You're still above 50%, right? So not too bad. You increase your chance to kill by 6%, which is nice. But the chance you lose and die because you went down to D5 instead of being D6 is a massive 15% increase. Because you have to consider, right, that both these guys are going to be striking against you. And instead of wounding on sixes, they're both going to be wounding on fives, right? Which means they both have a 1 in 3 chance of killing you. So if you have a shield here, and it's this 2 dice versus 2 dice situation, which will happen a lot, statistically, it is a better idea, usually, to not two-hand here, right? However, I'm not going to preach about the know what's going on, blah, blah, blah. If you have a model that is already D5, like this, in this situation, I don't have it written down here now, but this 15% increase is more like a 7% increase here, right? Because you're already getting wounded on fives by both guys, right? So it's going to be a similar chance to die, like 30%, but it was already that to begin with, right? So in this situation, on average, I would say it is usually a good idea to two-hand here. Obviously, look at the context of what's happening in the larger game, but statistically, you probably want to two-hand here to increase your lethality because your kill chance goes up 6% and you only really increase your chance to die by like 7%, as opposed to the massive disadvantage you'll be at if you don't two-hand, because you'll have a lot more trouble trying to wound. Of course, another very common and your most optimal situation, right, is when you have a banner present, right? Should in this same situation, you have a banner, they don't in this instance, should you two-hand here? Now the thing with having a higher fight is the strength of higher fight is the more dice you can get into a fight, the stronger having that fight value is. But the less dice you have, as we've seen earlier, the less valuable having higher fight is, right? So just as a side note, if you're fighting a higher fight army, you want to kind of separate fights as much as you can into as low dice as possible. But if you're playing a high fight army, you want to get as many dice as you can into the fight, right? As you can see here, 3 dice versus 2. 72% chance to win the duel roll for the elves, which is huge. This is, of course, not two-handing. 21% chance to win and kill, so 1 in 5 fights, pretty much. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And chance to lose and die, around 9%. So 1 in 10 fights you'll lose and die like this. So, you know, this is a pretty significant advantage, and this is before two-handing, right? So what happens if we two-hand with the front guy here? Go down the defense, right? The dual roll barely changes because we have so many dice in this situation. It's essentially the same, which is very favored for the elves. The chance to win and kill goes up about 8%, and the chance to lose and die goes up about 8%, so the same. So really, in this situation, if you choose to two-hand like this, you're just deciding how lethal you want the engagement to be, right? Can you afford to lose models? Do you really need to kill models? It's pretty much solely going to be coming down to that, right? But what that also means is, again, I don't know why I put these models away, but in this situation when you're already D5, you're very, very often going to be wanting to two-hand in this situation because it just makes the math a lot better for you. And finally, we come to the kind of full battle line situation. Both players are at full power. Guy at front, spear support, banner. Fighting guy at front, spear support, banner. 3 dice versus 3 dice. I'm not going to go too deep into this one, but it's similar to the last, but a bit worse for the elves, right? You know, they win like this. If you guys want to have a quick look, kind of getting killed a bit here, but still very similar to the last example, just a bit worse, right? So that's the gist of when to two-hand in these situations. There are a couple of special situations I think are worth mentioning, which I will do now. Let me just clean up some models here. More so I'll focus on the one-on-one aspect. The first one I'll go for is, let's talk about these Morannons, right? Now, a Morannon is strength 4, right? So when you're fighting armies or profiles that have strength 4, the fact that I'm D6 doesn't matter. I could be D5, D6. He's still wounding me on 5s regardless. So don't worry about losing the defense from the shield here because it won't make a difference, which can make it... It makes it so you are more... You know, it's more enticing to two hands, right? And he's D6, so regardless of whether I have a shield here or not, it makes me more likely to two hands here, right? Another example I will use is take an Uruk-hai Scout. He's strength 4 as well, but it doesn't matter. I could be using a warrior as well. The shield part's not important here. He's wounding me on 5s, but because he's D5 as well, I'm wounding him on 5s. Should I two-hand here? The answer is usually no, right? Because you're winning on the fight, and you're both wounding the same. So you're statistically ahead, right? What else can we do? Ah, yes. This is an important one. Now, here, when Ironhill's warriors are like this, they get shield wall, which makes them D8. Or maybe you're just fighting a warrior of the dead who is D8, right? Should you two hands here, right? Because as you know, strength 3 into defense 8 is you have to roll a 6 and then a 4, right? So when you're fighting this, this is what it looks like when you just fight normally, right? Your chance, just raw chance to wound if you win the dual roll is 8%, right? But your chance to win and kill is like 5%. That's really low. That's like 1 in 20 fights you will win and kill one of these guys. Just 1 dice versus 1 dice, right? Whereas if you two hands, the thing is it gives you +1 down to 5. But then for the second roll, where you need a 4, it also +1s that, so it goes down to a 3. And as you can see here, the chance to wound it skyrockets up to 22%. and the chance to win and kill goes to 10%. So you've gone from 1 in 20 fights you're winning and killing to 1 in 10 fights. You've like halved it, right? So I find that I will almost always two hands against D8 models. I think it's almost always worth it. The only times when it's not, obviously, is when you can't afford to lose models for whatever reason, as we've already talked about, right? But yeah, thanks for watching. This was a quick one. I have a couple more ideas for videos. Let me know what you'd like in the comments. I'll definitely do my best to do them both, but I'm not sure what I'll do first. I have an idea. One is a kind of TTS battle report, but I'll be able to do a lot of special things with it that you wouldn't be able to see in a normal battle report. I'm thinking of like saving a lot of kind of states of the game so that I can go back and I can say this could have happened, this could have happened, this is what was being thought here and such. And I'll have the actual recording of the battle report with all the talking and that as well, right? But it is hard for me to play games recently. I'm lucky to play more than one game a week at the moment. So that one might be what's coming later on, but maybe I'll get lucky, right? And the other video, which I'm not sure if I'll make it or not. I don't know how much interest there is. But it's more a video that's kind of a commentary on, I guess you'd call it match fixing or potential match fixing in the competitive community, right? Which is mostly to do with some recent and even past controversies with people offering draws in their games. But it's not just going to be me talking like about, oh, this is bad, this is bad. I will use, I have 3 examples in mind. I will have in-game examples going over this. And I think it'd actually be a really interesting video. So anyway, as I already said, thanks for watching, and let me know what you'd like to see next. If you have any other cool ideas, I remember someone said about a TTS video of how to use different shortcuts, like kind of stuff like this. You know what I mean? There's a bunch of other ones. You can move models. You can get rid of models like this. It's a lot of cool shortcuts. I could make a video like that if people want that. But yeah, thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments what you'd like to see next.